record. Yep, record.
Okay, so today is October 15th, 2020. And my name's Karen. I'm a part of Co-Creators Convergence as well as The Conversation. And I have the honor tonight of hosting Annie Spade as she returns to us. But I first want to say a little bit of something about The Conversation. It's a place where we converse and take action to transform life on Earth, as well as heal it, life on this planet, including the planet itself. So this is an amazing platform that three gentlemen who I'm just getting to know from a personality level, but from a heart level, definitely relations, as we all are. So Peter Melton, Jamin Shively, and Salesh Rao, and I might be pronouncing Salesh's name wrong, but if you get a chance, if you don't know them, to take a moment to get on to this website, theconversation.cc, learn a little bit about them, because their hearts are all gathered and collected in wanting to really shift our climate and humanity. And the way that I, as a Co-Creators Convergence member, am here tonight at The Conversation is because of Bob and Noel. So Bob and Noel, light partners and light workers, started the Co-Creators Convergence after they spent a year with Barbara Marx Hubbard on her Birth 2012 tour around the nation. And when that concluded, just in you know, as Barbara Marx Hubbard knows, we do everything together and better when we co-create. And so Bob and Noel created this group so that we could all just come together in our light and in our passion. And I did write something down that I want to look at about Bob and Noel. I call them light partners, and one of their gifts is that they co-create and connect light beings across the world. And I just think that that's so powerful. So they have brought us to this platform where they were having people come together once a month on Thursdays. They've brought us to The Conversation so that we can have these powerful people coming to share and inspire. And tonight, we are so lucky to have Annie Spade returning to us. So last week, Annie was here. And again, let me just look at my notes real quick. So what I wanted to say is that in the spirit of co-creation, I'm going to point out that last week when Annie was speaking, she concluded that she had given us this extremely inspirational and informative talk on the life of Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. And she said, "This is my dream come true, to be able to share about his life and Maria Montessori, you know, what I've studied for many, many of my years." And that is what the gift of Co-Creators Convergence does. It helps us to all live our dreams by coming together in these synchronic ways. So tonight, Annie is going to be sharing about the Montessori Project that she has launched. She's going to be telling us all about Maria Montessori's life. And I just remember last night that she said, or last week, she said from Teilhard, "Love is a co-creative fire driving evolution forward." And I think that's such a beautiful way to sum up this group, The Conversation, the co-creators, and what Annie is going to be sharing with us tonight. So Annie, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Wow. Thank you so much, Karen. That's beautiful. Jamin, are you with us? You're going to be with
Hi,
us?
Jamin.
I am here.
All right. Cool. Fabulous. Well,
yeah, very happy to be here. Great to see you, Karen. Thank you.
Big gratitude to you and Peter, and yeah, this is fabulous. Well, I just will begin by just again being so thankful for this opportunity to bring the child's voice in. This has really given me such a chance to really get my thoughts together from a lifetime of work, as I described to you all last week. And so I'd just like to begin by doing a little meditation that I learned from Sister Jenna that I think really helps us to get into the spirit of the child, which is what we'll be really highlighting tonight. So I'm just going to invite us all to put our feet on the ground wherever we are. If you're sitting down, as most of us are probably, that we can feel, you know, what the yogis call the sits bones, held by the gravitation of the earth. And for us to just all close our eyes. I'm going to invite us to imagine ourselves, and I'll do it in a personal way. I invite you to imagine yourself without your name, without your gender, without your race, without your country, without your role. We imagine ourselves this way. There is only love, or God, or light. It's the original way that we came into this world. In some sense, unfettered and whole. I invite you to flutter your eyes open when you're ready. So let's see. So thank you for going on that little journey. To me, that really evokes our newborn selves, our child self. I'm very grateful to Sister Jenna for that. And last week, I kind of opened with a kind of pervasive idea of Teilhard's, which honestly is hard to find in his writings directly spoken this way, but everything that rises must converge. And so tonight we'll be considering the individual, and this was primary to Teilhard as well, and certainly to Montessori, is the becomingness of the individual. And as each one is becoming who they are, who they came here to be, becoming themselves. We're rising. This is how we're ready to converge. And so I wanted to revisit this delightful meeting between Teilhard and Jean Houston, because I think he's so inviting. She was an adolescent at the time, but as Dr. Maria Montessori observed, we're not fully adult until we're 24 years old. And we'll get into this a little bit more later on. But she recognized that brain development was not complete until that time. So here was Jean at the age of 14, and she had begun regular walks with Teilhard once a week in Central Park in New York. And she says, the walks were magical and full of delight. Not only did Mr. Teilhard, as she knew him, she did not know him as Teilhard de Chardin, the priest. She knew him only as Mr. Teilhard. Not only did Mr. Teilhard seem to have absolutely no self-consciousness, but he was always being seized by wonder and astonishment over the simplest things. He was constantly and literally falling in love. I remember one time when he suddenly fell on his knees, his long Gaelic nose raking the ground, and exclaimed to me, "Jean, look at the caterpillar." I joined him on the ground to see what had evoked so profound a response that he was seized by the essence of a caterpillar. "How beautiful it is," he remarked. "This little green being with its wonderful, funny little feet. Exquisite. Little furry body, little green feet on the road to metamorphosis." He then regarded me with equal delight. "Jean, can you feel yourself to be a caterpillar?" "Oh yes," I replied with the baleful knowing of a gangly, pimply-faced teenager. "Then think of your own metamorphosis," he suggested. "What will you be when you become a butterfly? Un papillon, eh? What is the butterfly of Jean?" His long, Gothic, comic, tragic face would nod with wonder. "Eh, Jean? Look at the clouds. God's calligraphy in the sky. All that transforming, moving, changing, dissolving, becoming. Jean, become a cloud and become all the forms that ever were." So clearly we worked this through last time. Teilhard saw love as the driving force, falling in love with creation, with others, and with self. Remember, he wrote to Mademoiselle Zanta that as long as she kept to that place of her utmost effort and the resistance of things, as he called it, she would be a profoundly useful atom in the universe, is how he saw it. So Montessori, like Teilhard, was a person who followed her inner guidance, and she had obstacles in her life early on as well. She struggled in school, which might be no surprise, which laid some foundations for her. And she was a go-getter. You know, as a young woman, she chose to go to medical school, and her father just basically disowned her for many years because of that. It was just so unacceptable. So she ended up being the first woman that graduated medical school in Italy. And I mentioned last week that she had to do her dissections at night because it was considered improper for her to do this in the presence of the men. And we don't really know that much about Maria's childhood. She was an only child. She grew up in a Catholic home. Her mother was very devout, as was Teilhard's. And we have the little story about when she was quite ill, although we don't know if she was chronically ill. She was apparently kind of a private person about her childhood. And of course, didn't have siblings to tell about it either, and didn't write about it the way Teilhard did. So, but we can just kind of look at that and see that she had some foundations there of a strong faith life and working with some struggles, definitely, as she's going along. But she also had great faith in the human spirit, as did Teilhard, and in evolution. She mentions it in her lectures. I mentioned that she lectured on peace and was actually nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize in the 30s, in between the world wars. And she was also quite prophetic. So I'm going to share about how she started her first children's school. And I mentioned this too last week. I just skipped over this, that when she was a child and when she was really ill, her parents, her being an only child especially, were very, very worried about her at some point. And this was the time when she said, "Oh, please, I will be living past this time. I have way too much to do." So her clairvoyance into the future will continue. We'll get to that in just a moment. So I wanted to share with you just a little bit about my own coming to Montessori, just so you kind of have a context here. I too grew up Catholic. I went to Catholic school and kind of had some of those challenging experiences that people talk about. But I was raised in a devout home as well, and in West Texas, quite conservative, but I think I had a strong traditional education. But when I was a child, I was really so hungry to learn, and I well remember being sparked by Daniel Boone. When that program came on television, I researched in the school library every book I could find on him, and then I was a Girl Scout, and I think that was really my salvation because of the badge work that you could choose to investigate, gardening or sewing or communications, or there were just so many topics and so many suggestions of activities you could do to explore the topics more in depth. And so I had a lot of badges. And so I could just really trace that back and recognize that what I noticed as a teenager was really living in me all the way through, that I was a voracious learner. And when I became a teenager, I recognized that, wow, school doesn't have that much to do with that. It's more about, making the grade and remember it for the test and then move on. But that was real different from me cracking open the National Geographic and, reading it cover to cover, I admit. So, and where did that have any entry point into school, which was meant to be all about learning? So this, what actually happened for me, I think, was just absolutely the key that unlocked the door, was that I had back surgery at the beginning of my junior year of high school. And so at that time, it was for scoliosis, and at that time they put me in a body cast for 9 months. So this meant I could not go to school, and my family had just moved 500 miles across the state of Texas to Houston. So yeah, I was away from all my friends, and I was at home with my little 2- and 3-year-old brother and sister, and just kind of had this quiet year. But I had always been an introspective type of kid. I loved to go out after supper and just hang out in a tree, or just, you know, have some quiet time. The evening was always my time. So I honestly didn't suffer too badly. I mean, I look back at it, Jamin, you know, I saw your response, and I have looked back on that and gone, why didn't I get to live with my grandparents who were still in our hometown or whatever? But I think it was all meant to be, because it honestly formed a year of pause for me, and gave me that silence that allowed me to kind of reset, so that when I re-entered high school for my senior year in a brand new school with all new people that had some kind of supposed new form of education, which really wasn't, that my parents had been sold on it, open concept. You know, at that age, as an adolescent, I just said, wow, you know, this has really got to change. So I committed myself at that moment to doing something to reform education. I'd never heard of Montessori at that point. And I said, okay, I'm gonna go to college and study psychology, because this way I can look at foundations and maybe I'll start my own school. So halfway through university studies, I was in the bookstore, as you could imagine, not the university bookstore, but, you know, something in the mall at that time. And here's this little book. It actually wasn't this one, but it was the companion book. It was The Discovery of the Child by Maria Montessori. This one is The Secret of Childhood by Maria Montessori, but it was the exact same publisher, and I didn't bring that one here to my desk for this, but The Discovery of the Child with another child on the front. Oh, this looks interesting. So I pick up this book, and oh my goodness, I thought I was reading my own vision into what she was saying. I thought it couldn't possibly be true. And then it was just so amazing. There must be a Montessori society out there or something. Well, so I open up the Houston phone book and I go, oh my goodness, there are schools. I have to go to one of these, you know. So anyway, I saw that indeed people were actually doing what she was talking about, which we'll get into in a moment. And so that set my course at that point. I finished in psychology, but I ended up getting married before I left school and having a couple of lovely daughters. And so that was put a bit on pause in terms of pursuing my Montessori, but not too long. So that just kind of gives you an idea of how I got into it. I'd like to go over now to Maria's story. And Maria was, as I say, trained as a medical doctor. And, you know, there weren't tons of options. She did have some patients, you know, that she worked with, but, you know, in those days, women and children were seen a lot together, and she became interested in education and children and measuring children. That was a lot of what they did at that time. They didn't understand too much about child development at that point, but she began to study a couple of French doctors that had worked with so-called defective children, so children with challenges. And they had created hands-on materials for these children. So Maria worked with a group of children in Italy and used those materials, and the children were passing the state exams. I don't know what these children's challenges were, but they were passing the state exams in 1 year just by using these these hands-on materials and being much more active in their education. So she was just amazed by this. And she said, I need to find some normal children to work with to study this further. So lo and behold, she was offered that opportunity in a working class neighborhood. There were preschool age children that were kind of running the streets with their parents working during the day. And so they were seeking someone to, look after their physical needs, certainly, and make sure they didn't destroy things and get into trouble. And she says, perfect, I'll take them. So 50 children she takes, 50 children. And the story is told that it was the Feast of the Epiphany. So I don't know if you know the Feast of the Epiphany, but the Epiphany is when the Magi, which is the wise ones. Now we think of it as the three kings, but it was the Magi, the wise ones, was the true translation of this visit to the Christ child when he was, we don't know exactly how old he was, but it took them some time to follow the star to see and honor the Christ child. And this is their whole mission. They go to Jerusalem first, and King Herod is a little put off that they're looking for the newborn king, which is a child. So this is the feast that ends up being the morning that she's opening her first children's house, Casa dei Bambini. So the significance of this is not lost on her. And she reads the Isaiah prophecy. I'm going to quote it for you. It's great. She reads the entire thing to the gathered press and, whatnot, because she was hired by the state to take care of these children. Rise up in splendor, Jerusalem. Your light has come. The glory of the Lord shines upon you. See, darkness covers the earth, and thick clouds cover the peoples. But upon you does God shine, and over you appears God's glory. Nations shall walk by your light, kings by your shining radiance. Raise your eyes and look about. They all gather and come to you. Your sons come from afar, your daughters in the arms of their nurses. Then you shall be radiant at what you see. Your heart shall throb and overflow, for the riches of the sea shall be emptied out before you. Caravans of camels shall fill you, dromedaries from Midian and Ephah, all from Sheba shall come, bearing gold and frankincense and proclaiming the praises of God. And then she says, perhaps this children's house may become a new Jerusalem, which, if it is spread amongst the abandoned peoples of the world, can bring new light to education. And she was criticized for, being so flamboyant and, having such high and mighty ideas. But she said she just felt so inspired and had a real sense that something was going to happen here. And believe me, she was quite surprised by what happened. It was not at all that she expected what occurred. So a little bit more of intro and then we'll dive into it. Anyone have anything they wanted to comment here? I'll just charge on, but go, Jamin. Yep.
I just love what you said about, stopping and reading a National Geographic cover to cover, because I was brought up in a relatively academic, family and environment and all that. And it was just, you just keep with the programming. I felt like a dog sled dog who just had to keep up. And I wanted to stop and read this and read that and explore this and explore that. But we felt so constrained back then. It was, it was a different time. I was born in 1968. And, it was just keep up, keep up, keep up. Anyway, I just wanted to high five you for that.
Yes,
Thank you.
Absolutely. It's so true. So true. And more so today. my heart breaks that I took honors classes, and that was just another thing that inspired me was the things that, we read James Joyce and Hermann Hesse and, all this, and now if a student, is interested in English, does well in it, well, okay, well, let's do advanced placement for college, and let's, again, it's just that driving, jump through the next hoop kind of thing with no opportunity for reflection. Yeah, absolutely. So Montessori saw the whole child. What the source of that was exactly, her faith and all, which was clearly very strong. So she began to talk early on about the spiritual embryo, that the child, as a medical doctor, she would have been very much into the physical embryo, but she spoke of the spiritual embryo because early on she saw that psychologically that the child was had special powers and was becoming, that they weren't just physically growing, that there was so much more going on. And so she, as I mentioned, she had studied these French doctors that had developed hands-on materials. And so she, over time, developed the idea, it's given us a very simple diagram, if you will. You think of two concentric circles. The outer circle would be the world, the environment. The inner circle would be our what we have going on internally. So right now, every one of us is having feelings, thoughts that unless we try to tell someone about them, no one knows what we're thinking, what we're feeling, right? It's our own interior self. And then Montessori said, if you think of the ring that divides those two, she says, what we want is to establish points of contact between the two. And so this is where the child's going to be influenced by the environment, and we're going to be influenced by the environment. But imagine the difference between just being tossed and turned, almost like, we were just discussing, Jamin, just being bombarded by all of this. And yes, it's going to have some effects, but to have a situation where you have a rich environment and you're given the opportunity to choose and to reflect and take the time to connect to that. So she calls this points of contact that will really serve the becoming of the spiritual embryo. So this was the way she saw it. And so she prepared an environment, very sparse at that point, and began to observe the children. And she would just instruct a couple of other women to work with the children, and then she worked as a scientist. And I always say she sat at the feet of the young child, that she was willing to really go at it with the learner's mind, as I think Richard Rohr is the one that talks about the learner's mind, to come at it with no preconceived notion. And so the children showed her immediately that they wanted to participate in life. They wanted to clean the floor. Could I mop the floor, And at that time, there was no furniture for young children. Children were just expected to grow up and just manage with the adult things until you could become big enough. That's, kind of your problem in a way. And so Montessori said, let's make some furniture the right size. And of course, there were no mops, the right size for children. So she got this little team of carpenters, started making things as she would come to them with her children's, desires, and she just began to meet them. And she said that the child was saying to her, help me to help myself. You know, just give me the tools. I would like to move my furniture around, but you know, if I have to deal with an adult-sized chair, I can't, you know, but I could take care of it if you would provide me with something that I could lift. So, and the child showed that they didn't want to be served with, you know, dressing and whatnot. And, you know, as I got into this as a young mom, you know, your little one, like an infant, you know, it's not too terribly long before, oh, they know the pattern of having their shirt put on, and their little arm is starting to try to push into the sleeve. Well, how about you just straighten the sleeve out so they can do that instead of dragging their arm through, you know, kind of thing. You know, these are the subtle cues that you can notice as the child comes into life and capability. And so Montessori saw this with her little ones, and so, you know, they wanted to, could you show me how to button myself? Oh, I know what I was going to say. Montessori says at one point, she says, we treat our children like dolls. I said, oh my gosh, that is so true. You know, and there, I think I'm going to read this to you later. There, one reading I came across getting ready for this, you know, and she's talking about, you know, how they're so adorable, you know, and so and we're so powerful. And there are some children that, I will tell you, Dr. James Dobson, of all people, I used to read some of his stuff, and he would talk about, there's kind of two categories of children, if you will, the little lovers and the little fighters. So your little lover, it's like, okay, well, just take care of me. All right. Do you love me, mommy? You know, do you like this, mommy? You know, just the little pleasers, you know. And then there's the little fighter, you know, that is not too happy about being treated like a doll, you know. But honestly, neither one of them are, you know. It's not going to serve the becoming of the child either way. And then the final thing that the children were showing her is that, you know, just give me some help to know how to be courteous to the other children, you know, to let someone else pass, you know, even things like pushing my chair in, because, you know, if we don't push our chair in, then we're going to all be tripping on it. You know, it's just the demands of living in a community. So this is how the children's house developed. And so, yeah, it's so hard to get it all out, right? So, and a big part of it too, more and more, like I'm kind of talking about gross motor things here, is more and more using the hand. And Montessori came to say, you know, the hand is the instrument of the mind. And so when we're talking about the points of contact, especially, you know, you can see that so operative, right? Where, you know, oh, I'm drawn to, you know, work with plants, or, you know, to draw something or paint, or, you know, to polish something. In those days, they did a lot of polishing. We still do a little polishing. We have wood polishing and brass polishing in the classroom. But, you know, the more the child has their fingers, I sometimes get, you know, like a new 4-year-old, and they don't even really have their little fingers, you know, but you give them a few things to do, and you think about how empowering that is, right? You know, that if you didn't have your fingers to be able to manipulate small things, how frustrating, right? And so it is amazing. I mean, within 6 weeks, the child will have their fingers and just can't get enough of it, you know. It's so empowering and so exciting for them. So I was gonna share a couple of let's go ahead and do the slideshow in a way, Karen. Let's show some pictures of the Montessori classroom. Oh, here we go. Noelle has a question. Did she penalize children for using their left hands? Well, she was from Italy. I haven't read anything about that. I wouldn't expect it, but I don't know. You know, she wouldn't tell you that she didn't make mistakes. You know, but she really was so reverent towards the child from the beginning. Honestly, she's very hard on adults. This has been one of my problems with Montessori. I mean, when you read her writings, oh my goodness, it's a little rough on the adults there. It's like, hey, we were kids once and we didn't get this treatment. So, you know, we've got a lot of remedial work to do and the children can help us, you know. And the children are very forgiving. So, you know, just keep trying. Did she ever have children? She had one. She had her son Mario. So what happened was, yeah, and this is really interesting about Maria, that she fell in love when she was in medical school with one of her fellow students. And then she became pregnant. And he didn't want to marry her. And so at that time, I mean, this was pre-turn of the century, last century. So that was really unacceptable. So I think she went away, as women did in those days, and had her son. And then she found a family in the country to raise him. But she would visit him very often. And he just thought, you know, he was raised to not know that she was his mother. He was raised to think she was just, you know, like an auntie or something coming to visit. And one day when he was in later adolescence, he said, I know that you're my mother and I want to be with you. So, yeah. And he ended up, the two of them, when Mussolini came to power, he closed all her schools in Italy. He was burning her books. And she was already by that time traveling around with, you know, spreading the good news of what she had discovered about the child. And so she and Mario were in India. And I used to think that they were just warmly received in India and had a great time there. Not quite so much. He was put in prison and she was under house arrest for quite some time. But she was teaching, people were coming to her and she was teaching them. And after a while, so many people were, I want to use the word endeared. They, you know, they loved her so much and loved what she was sharing. It was so valuable. And so because of that, she petitioned that her son would be, you know, released from prison. It had something to do with the political situation and the war and all. So all throughout World War II, she and Mario were in India. And once he got out, they began to work on the next phase of development. Because by this time, it had been like 3 decades that they had been working, she had been working, first of all, with the birth to 6 age group. She saw that the child really shifted. Sorry, I'm probably gonna go hoarse. I've been realizing that something in the air today. So I hope you can continue to hear me. So when she became, thank you, Jamin. So she did notice at 6 that the child, a lot of things changed about the child. The child became not so concerned about external order. We're gonna cycle back to the young child in a minute, but they were seeing that something new had to be developed for 6 to 12. And so I'll talk about that in more depth in a few minutes, but it was during their time in India that they were able to really work on that. And so Mario is really the one that is looked to as the founder of the Montessori kind of elementary advanced time. So yeah, let's, oh, I want to give you, a couple of little quotes. But how about let's look at the slides first, and then I want to tell you what Maria had to say.
Give me a second here.
Yeah.
Oh. Okay. Sorry, one thing that I set these all up on my desktop, but now it's not letting me actually go there because I'm recording.
Okay, I'm going to start talk. I'm going to talk.
Yeah, please talk.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So, there's always more to say, right? Montessori talked about sensitive periods, and a sensitive period is when the child is just so hungry and so driven by something. And there are a lot of short sensitive periods during the birth to 6 phase. But the 2 sensitive periods, if you can call it, that they're more like an era that go across the entire time period, are sensitivity to order and sensitivity to language. So when we think about order, let's go back to the newborn. And so I mentioned this last time, you know, when a baby is born, they don't know where they are. They have to make sense of this place. They have to adapt to this place. And Montessori recognized the child has tremendous powers of adaptation. So orienting to their environment is really big for the child. And they're going to absorb all the customs, the food preferences, the language, everything that's in their environment, and try to make some sense, some order of it. And so the more that we can keep things in their environment where they know where they are, it really empowers them and also helps them with this kind of figuring out how everything all fits together. So I don't know if Karen's going to be able to get it up. If not, I'll just talk you through it. Are you ready to go?
Do you see the first picture?
I don't.
Ah. Because
So I'm going to start with 2 pictures of my classroom of just what the shelf looks like, the shelving looks like. And then I'll have a little comment about what Maria discovered, which is why Montessori classrooms look like this.
Okay, hold on. I'm not sure why it's not showing here.
Sharing your screen. So I'll tell the little story before we see this. So in the Montessori classroom, you're going to see that everything is set out on the shelves for the children to choose. And this is a perfect little example of what happened for Maria, because originally these women that she called guides that were with the children, or directresses, she used that term also, directress, that they would have all the manipulatives and materials in a cabinet. They had locked cabinet that they would open at the beginning of the day. And the children's house was part of the apartment complex where they lived. So the story is told that one day, you know, of course, this became famous very early on, these children calming down and the way that they were, the transformation that went on there. And so people were coming to visit, not only from around Italy, but all over Europe and even from the US. And sometime, here we go, lovely, just on cue. So one day, visitors came and the materials were in the locked cabinet, but the directresses were nowhere around. And the visitors were very disappointed. And the children said, oh, it's no problem. We know where the key is. So they went and they unlocked the cabinets and began working with the materials so that the visitors could see. And when one of the adults came on the scene, they were quite upset that the children had done this. And when Montessori found out about it, she said, well, what was going on? And they said, well, actually, they were managing everything quite well. And she said, well, let's take the doors off then. So from then on, that was when they discovered that the children needed to freely choose their activities, not to have to go through an adult and ask, right? So this is why in the Montessori classroom, you're going to see everything set out on the shelf. So you can see how easy it is for a child to just grasp a tray or a basket. They're going to notice where it is. It is in the same place every single day, set up for them every day with the materials that they need. I remember we used to have a one-way mirror, and one of my early parents was observing through the one-way mirror one day, her little son, and she said, I thought he was getting into things. I was horrified. And she said, and then it was like he knew exactly what he was doing. So, you know, you can imagine this mom behind the one-way mirror thinking, oh my gosh, they don't realize he's getting into stuff. And he knew what he was doing. He was opening the drawer and getting his little polishing cloth and replenishing or whatever it was. So, so we talked about handworks. And so the progression of sewing works in the classroom is a great little opportunity to flesh this out a little bit on how this works. So, you know, keeping the quote unquote challenge level just at the perfect level for that child, and just allowing them to continue to progress along. I was working with a little gal that just turned 3 today, and she's just all about wanting to write her numbers quite precociously. Her mom is a Harvard grad, actually, so I'm not terribly surprised. But you know, that just happens for her, and it's there for her, and that just because she is a particular age, that she wouldn't have that opportunity. Karen, if we could go back to that one, if you wouldn't mind, could we go back to the sewing one, just to kind of highlight it just a little bit? To just say that the children begin with bead stringing, like big wooden beads, and then they go to this kind of weaving work that you might have noticed on the left side with burlap, and then that progresses to a sharp needle. And of course, this is going along with the child, you know, having more sense of responsibility and all of that to keep and to be able to manipulate such a tiny little needle. Oh dear, did we lose it completely?
I'm getting
whatever you can get back to. But anyway, if you notice that progression of sewing on the other side of my jabbering, that, you know, they're going to do embroidery and beading, and then they do little projects, little pillows and little bags. And that's over like a 3-year period of 3s, 4s, and 5s. So that's a perfect example of how the works continue to grow up with the child and just continue to offer them the correct challenge that's interesting to them. And so, so yeah, and we can actually go back to that. The next part that Karen has some slides on had to do with language development. But I think this is a good moment to give you a couple of things about Maria and how astonishing this was to her. And one of the things she says here in this book, which is called The Secret of Childhood, that's where part of our title comes from tonight, is she says, I began my work like a peasant who has set aside good seed and who is offered a fertile field in which to sow it. But it turned out otherwise. I had hardly scratched the clods when I found gold instead of grain. The clods hid a precious treasure. My work for those children brought me a series of surprises. And the biggest surprise, honestly, I had today, an observation by a woman who had never been in a Montessori classroom before. And she wrote me a little note on email after observing in the classroom. And here's what she said. Annie, thank you for inviting me to observe your classroom, exclamation. It was such a pleasant and peaceful experience. The children are so well behaved and are so engaged and independent. I would like for my husband to come, et cetera, et cetera. So, so this is the phenomenon. This is what happened. As the children established these points of contact, in other words, they thought, I would like to do some painting. I would like to do some sewing internally, and were able to act upon that urge in the outer environment, external environment, and virtually 100% be able to take care of getting their supplies together and doing the entire thing, and work with it as long as you like. I mean, a particular activity, one child might work with it 10 minutes, the next child might spend an hour with it, and no one's going to disturb that. We spend 2.5 to 3 hours in that room together. So here's what she says. Well, I'll give you, I'm going to paraphrase some of it so we can just move along, but I'll just say that the women that were working for her started to tell her about this, how peaceful the children were and how well behaved and et cetera, how contemplative they became, you know, how silent they were, peaceful. And she didn't believe them, but then she began to see it somewhat herself. And she says, finally, one day she just stopped and she just said, who are you? To herself, who are you? She says, were these perhaps the little children who Christ had embraced and of whom he had said, whoever receives this little child for my sake receives me? Or again, whoever does not accept the kingdom of God as a little child will not enter it? I looked upon these children with such great respect and affection, and I placed my hand upon my heart. It is a phenomenon, if you never have seen it. So we're almost, thank you, Jamin. We're almost at the top of the hour. I'd like to say just a little bit about the progression of Montessori beyond the children's house. And, thank you. And if language comes back, we can say a little bit about language. But then I want to talk about the challenge here. This is the Montessori School meeting room. I love it. Yes, so true, Noelle. Yeah. And, you know, she does talk a lot about our pride, and it's hard. And, you know, and little children know that we're bigger and more powerful in some way, but wow. All you have to do is see these little ones and you realize not so much. So there, I didn't see what the last chat was. Was that Karen who said something, the last thing? Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
What'd you say?
I just was saying I had other screenshots open and they aren't.
Oh, we lost it. We lost it. Okay. Well, so let's yeah, let me just go quick through it. That last time we mentioned, I mentioned that there were two people that were disciples of Montessori that went more in depth in exploring the spiritual potential of early childhood. Maria saw it. She saw that there was a real affinity for a deep spiritual life that the children clearly had, but she didn't, you know, have the time to be the one to research it. So Sophia Cavalletti and John Agobi began in 1954, 2 years after Montessori died, and it took them decades before they were ready to take it out to the world. But they discovered 5 spiritual potentials of early childhood, or characteristics, if you will. One is that the child is naturally metaphysical. They have a real sense of transcendence. I shared with you one of the main ways that I have observed this over the years is young children understanding that when someone dies, we miss them, but they're still with us. I've had parents with tears in their eyes telling me about how someone in the family died, or a neighbor's beloved cat died, or whatever, and their little one was able to be so comforting, and so just in tune with the truth that love hasn't gone away, while at the same time being compassionate. So, and there are some other stories, but the second thing is that the child is essential. And again, this kind of goes along with the child's strong sense of order, that the child is a kind of simplicity, if you will, but it's deeper than that, because the child is essential. They want to know the most important things, you know? So it's not like an ascetical kind of a thing, but more of what really matters, you know? So these researchers worked in the Christian tradition. And so, you know, they tried out a lot of different Bible stories or what have you, and the children were just very clear about what really brought them joy and what they were really interested in spending a lot of time on. And it was, you know, Jesus as an infant, the infancy narratives. They were also very much interested in his transition. And those are the things that the children gravitate back to over and over again. But I think it's true of the child in general. The child is just seeking for that. And then the last 3 kind of go together, because, and we'll talk more about the sense of wonderment that kind of fuels these last 3. But the child's natural way is to be grateful. They're just so full of thankfulness and gratitude for everything. And this is, it's probably really as a result of being in love with everything. And that's actually the fifth one that I really highlighted last time. And then joy is the final of the 5 characteristics. The child has such a deep joyfulness, which we've already touched on. But, you know, we're not talking happiness, you know, birthday party happiness pinging off the walls, but a deep, abiding joyfulness is another mark of the child at this age. So we didn't get to see the language, but the children leave Children's House as readers, writers and readers. First writing, one of the things that I was sharing with you was a little report, if you will, on Johnny Appleseed. The child had read a little biography and then wrote about Johnny Appleseed in her own words and drew a picture of him. And it's in cursive. You know, cursive is very expressive of the personality. You couldn't pay me enough to teach a child to print. Cursive is just so fun. And you see their little personality immediately coming out. Some of them are so big with it and others are so small with it. And, you know, it's just and some were so exacting with it. They want to erase everything. It's like, just comes right flying out of little 3.5 to 4-year-olds. Typically, they're writing the entire cursive alphabet by 4. And so then we're going to go on to making words and sounding them out. They learn them by sound, phonetically, and then we're going to be reading words. And we just go right on in. They have incredible memory at this time. And these are the sensitive periods. I've mentioned sensitive periods, short sensitive periods. There's a sensitive period for writing, 3.5 to 4.5. We recognize this. We give them coloring books at this age, but Montessori gave them more. She gave them letters to trace, sandpaper letters, because they enjoyed the feeling of it. And lo and behold, they spontaneously began to write, and they couldn't stop. At that time, they had little slates with chalk, and they began writing all over the floor and the walls and everything, because there wasn't, they weren't doing paper and pencil. And so, so it was just really an explosion of writing. And I can tell you, I experience it every single day. Those little ones just want nothing more than to sit and do some writing at the top of every day. And moves on to reading. And so that really opens the door to learning. And Montessori said, she and Mario observed that between 6 to 12 years of age, the child's health is very stable, and they would have picked up these skills. As I say, my children that leave me from my kindergarten age, they are reading on like a 3rd grade level. I mean, they essentially read anything. Their memory is their best memory right now at that age. So guess what? When they see all these crazy English words that don't follow rules, it doesn't throw them off. Now, it helps to have some rules to get started, but I'll never forget the first time a child read the word beautiful without missing a beat, just, she was reading to me out of a book, and I taught her a few things, and yeah, she just picked it up. So, so Montessori saw that was the prime time. And so she and Mario developed something called cosmic education. So right away, your Teilhard light should be going off, cosmic education. And the cosmic education is fueled by something called the great stories. And I wish I was trained for elementary to say a bit more about this in depth, but I saw it with my daughters. So what will happen is that the guide, the teacher, will share these stories. And I know one of the stories is the God with no hands. And, it's just this great cosmic story about going through all the different eras of life on Earth. And I believe there are 5 great stories like this. And the idea is to spark the child's interest. And so, one child's like, oh, that stuff about the jellyfish was so cool. I want to learn more about jellyfish. So they're going to go off with that. And they're writing, they're reading. One of the things is they learn to draw in Children's House. I mean, if we're learning to write, then this is our facility with a pencil. Young children are not so critical of them, their drawing. And so, again, if we could see Johnny Appleseed, you would see how this child depicted Johnny Appleseed with his hoe or something like that and his apple tree. And so, they're going to use their art. And by the way, the math materials in Montessori are all completely concrete, hands-on. Montessori said, every child is mathematical. Every human being wants to calculate and estimate. It's just that we don't give them concrete materials to allow that to develop as the child is ready. And so, we very slowly take them into abstraction, but the materials are always there. And so we just go right back to it. If the child doesn't get it, oh, let's go back to the very concrete hands-on, no way you can't get it. I had a child a couple of years ago that I thought I wasn't going to be able to do math with her. She had some kind of a crazy block. Like she would look at 4 beads and I'd say, well, okay, so how many is that? And she'd go, 7. Like she was terrified of math for some reason. I don't know what it was, and her mom didn't know. And so I gave up and I told her mom, I just don't know. And this was going into her final year with me. And she came in her final year and went through half of the year still like this. And halfway through the year, she came to the table. And by the end of the year, she's telling her mom that math is her favorite subject. And she went on to public first grade and continued on saying that math is her favorite subject now. So one of the great success stories, but wow, like, oh my gosh, Maria, I don't know. Every child is mathematical, I don't know. But she just wouldn't connect for some reason. It was really weird. But, you know, allowing the child that time, some kind of maturity that she needed to feel like she was ready to dig into it. And when she was ready, boy, she just flew through so much of the curriculum. So the child is really able to bring all of this to bear in 6 to 12. And then Montessori, Maria and Mario, does Montessori go on? Okay, this is what I'm talking about right now, Noelle, continuing on here. So first I have to caduce to Maria because, you know, she was such an amazing scientist, child development observer. And she observed and wrote that a person is not fully adult until they are 24 years old. And so she came up with these 6-year planes of development. She says that each 6-year block, there's a real shift in the human person. Birth to 6, 6 to 12, 12 to 18, 18 to 24. And she was always all about that. I don't know if any of you remember, but a few years ago, about 10 years ago, I think it was, brain development researchers came out that, oh man, okay, the frontal lobe is not mature until the age of 24. And I said, Maria, there you go. There's the proof that you observed. So she was amazing with that. So 12 to 18, adolescence, she says there are mirror images. So birth to 6 and adolescence, 6 to 12, mirror each other. They're times of great shift and change. And 6 to 12 and 18 to 24 are times of much more stability for the human. And so she said 12 to 18, she advocated for the children to go and live on a farm with their guides during the week. And they would form community and they would learn about developing, taking care of the community, but also what kind of services they could provide for the larger community. There's something that goes on in 6 to 12 where the children is called going out. So the children go out and observe work going on. So that's just a seed, if you will, that's planted during this time of great learning, 6 to 12, that then serves them when they're in this adolescent phase to say, you know what, that was really cool when we went and saw a carpenter. I would like to get into that. I would like to start making, benches and offering them in the community. And so this is the idea of the Erkinder. And there are some Erkinder works going on. I don't know if I know of any that are done full on, because we're about to talk about this. There are a lot of challenges with Montessori because it doesn't fit, it's new wine and we've got old wineskins. And so Montessori's idea is that, you know, the child, what she observed that the child's need is in adolescence is this work within a community at a higher level than they have before, and this cooperation and this exploring how I might be of service in the world. So then she saw 18 to 24 to be the second primary time for study. So this relates to university time, but this is a child who's really had an opportunity to know themselves and to be in connection with what it is that they are feeling called to do and are most prepared to do and gifted to do. So yeah, so I have a longer reading, but let me see how I can trim this down because I want to talk about. We have some pictures we want to go through real quick a little bit.
Someone will make Bob a co-host. For some reason, it won't let him share, but he has the picture.
Okay. And if Olivia or someone can do that. Whenever it comes up, it'll be great. We'll enjoy it whenever it's here.
So I was just going to say, Annie, if Bob can step out to the campfire, just into the non-breakout room, we can make him co-host real quick.
Okay. You have any questions or comments that I missed here?
Yeah, I had some questions about how far, like you have a Montessori school yourself, correct?
Right.
What grades does that go, and do they use grades?
So what they do, my school is just one classroom, one community, and the children range in age from 2 to 6. So it's essentially through kindergarten, the kindergarten year. What Montessori does, what my children experience, my daughters, I have 3 daughters, I have 3 grown daughters that went to Montessori through elementary. On the elementary level, we continue to mix the ages. So it'd be like 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade, 6 to 9. That's known as lower elementary. And then we have 9 to 12, 4th, 5th, and 6th grade as upper elementary. So continuing to mix the ages of the children. Margaret Mead honestly studied peaceful cultures throughout the world, and she found that the most peaceful cultures were ones in which the children of different ages hung out together. And you know, it's absolutely true. I mean, if you have a classroom of just 4-year-olds, they're gonna become naturally competitive. The natural order of things is for them to be of different ages. And this also allows maximum flexibility in terms of their learning, so that, you know, if a child is not feeling like, you know, doing what, you know, a 5-year-old maybe typically does, they don't feel like they're not capable, and those materials are right there for them. So this gives you an example of it. This is she's almost 5, but she recently did a booklet of garden flowers. So this is her magnolia drawing and her word there. And now she read the ticket, and then she was copying how to spell it. Oh, can we go back to John? So I'll read Johnny Appleseed to you if we can stop on it. Can we go? Here we go. Johnny Appleseed. The apples are very good. This is her own thing. The apples are very good. They are very juicy and very good. He fed thousands of people, and he died when, page 2, when he was 70 years old. And then here's a picture of Johnny Appleseed hoeing in his tree. And the child that wrote this she had just turned 6. So you can see she was starting to connect some of her letters and all, but it was truly her own creation. And just that sense that you could write at that age is just so empowering. Yeah, and I think the other pictures are just of the property. I don't think we're going to end up with time to, yeah, that was the cover of the garden flower booklet that she did. And there were some pictures of the property and one child, and that kind of meditative.
Yeah, those are all the pictures we got.
That's all you got. Okay. So I wanted to just kind of preface this last little part here to say that I'm going to read, this is Montessori, and she's I'll just read it to you. She says, the progress that has been made in physics, chemistry, and biology, and the discovery of new means of transportation have augmented the danger of increased misery and the eventual triumph of barbarism in society. She's talking about society. She says this is, I guess I've jumped way ahead because she's talking about, okay, so she talks about something called normalization and deviations. So she says when the child can grow up in what we've just been talking about in the children's house, the child becomes normalized. You know, she saw this as, this is the normal way of human development. This is, the human person should become peaceful and introspective and focused, and all of this would be a life habit from the time the child is young. And she says if the child's not afforded this, there will be deviations. You know, the child's going to be frustrated, and so then you're going to have all these behaviors that she called deviations. So then she says the same is true of adults, you know, because it carries on. And she says deviated men who seek to obtain power and authority can become obsessed with any good. So these different inventions that I just mentioned, which is then transformed into something dangerous before it can be rightly used. Well, we see this going on, do we not? This is why any good, any discovery or invention can increase the ills that afflict the world. We can see this social effect produced by machines. They can be used to further man's material well-being or for war and the heaping up of excessive profits. And then she says, the progress that has been made augments the danger of increased misery and the eventual triumph of barbarism. We can thus place no hopes in the external world until the normalization of humanity is recognized as a basic social need. Only then will material progress bring true blessings and a higher form of civilization. Within the child lies the fate of the future. Whoever wishes to confer some benefit on society must preserve the child from deviations and observe his natural ways of acting. A child is mysterious and powerful and contains within himself the secret of human nature. And she had prefaced all of that to say how the child had shown her what the true human nature was. And so I wanted to say, why has Montessori not saved the planet? And I'm just going to quickly go through that. You know, Montessori has become big business, big schools, big classrooms, children not really given the attention they deserve. The preparation of the teacher, Maria talks so much about the spiritual preparation of the guides. And I can tell you, I received my Montessori training at a top training center that was one within the organization that she founded, the AMI. But it was very academic. And in fact, they didn't really want to talk about spirituality at all. They said, oh, when Montessori used that word, she meant psychic. I said, no, that's not what she meant. She meant, so she meant that too, but you know. So, you know, it's just another situation where, you know, the container wasn't there for it. But Montessori, the first children's house was founded in 1907. So the Montessori movement is now a little over 100 years old. And just like Teilhard, I feel that the container is just now coming into being for us. To give a little bit more of a context, you may have heard of Montessori in the public schools. I've had conversations with people, women who had worked in those schools, and same thing. They're wanting to test the children. They're wanting to see results immediately. Yeah, exactly. So it's just, you know, new wine in old wineskins, and it's not going to bear the fruit that is its possibility. I couldn't find it, but somewhere Montessori calls for an order of nuns that would take her work forward. I read it somewhere. I don't remember. It's in her work. But, you know, she has kind of the right idea. I mean, it's really a deep spiritual preparation that's called for, and a real work on developing these 5 characteristics that I just mentioned, you know, for ourselves, to be essential, to be in touch with our metaphysical self, to be in gratitude and wonderment, to fall in love, to be contemplative. And these are things that weren't talked about during my Montessori training, or weren't worked on at all. You know, it was just about, okay, here's how you give this lesson, write it down, type it up, turn it in, you know, have an oral exam on it, you know, all of that. So Christopher, did you want to say something? I see a hand up.
No, sir, I was just really resonating with what you were saying.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
And I do want to share, you had a couple comments in here.
Yes.
It's time to wrap up. I know you're
go right ahead. Absolutely.
Yes. But Olivia had mentioned about Maria Montessori and is it Moshe Feldenkrais have similar ideas. I think they just missed each other. Too bad they didn't confer the way.
This is Olivia. This is who?
Olivia is sharing. Do you know Feldenkrais? Is it Moshe, Olivia? Moshe Feldenkrais?
Oh, okay.
So she's saying, you know, too bad that they weren't able to confer. Go ahead, Olivia.
Right.
Moshe Feldenkrais was my teacher, and he was an Israeli physicist and a judo master and engineer. And he believed very much the way that Maria Montessori seems to have about the natural wisdom of the child and how the environment is really there for them to discover, and not to have parents, you know, trying to push the child too fast in different ways, but really allowing them to emerge with their own uniqueness. Yes. And it's beautiful. I've been wanting to know about Maria Montessori for many years. I've had master's advisees who have written on her. And as I think I told you, Annie, I have a friend who is a professor at Lesley University who loves Montessori and is preparing her granddaughter, hopefully just now, I guess she's just entered preschool, And she wants very much to have her go to a Montessori school. I'm hoping she can come to a future conversation. I pointed in your direction for your last week's, yeah, and also this week's. But this is fascinating.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, it's interesting how, great truths, they do rise up. Everything that rises converges, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know how to say your name. Tell me your name. How do you?
Hi all.
Hi, Jimena.
My name is Jimena.
Jimena. See?
Yeah, I am Mexican.
Yes.
I wanted to give you a very important tip that is right now happening. Maybe you already know. There are these schools, the cousin of one of my ex-boyfriends in Italy is working with this new education that is called Asilo nel Bosco. You can look for it. I can give you the.
Maybe you can type it in the chat.
Yes.
Chat.
And
That
the children
great.
in public schools, they just made the system where the children in public schools can get out to the sea or to the surroundings and start experimenting themselves with nature and other kinds of things out of the classrooms.
Yes.
And this has become like a boom in education. It is so brilliant. This idea has been like shared all around the world, and now they are building these new schools where the children get out of their classrooms somehow, like imitating the Socrates situation in the Greeks of the surroundings and mind and body and the health that they have with this interaction of looking at beautiful landscapes and and when I was in Italy, I had the opportunity to be in the classrooms, and as you said, like the different ages, and not only the different ages, the way they integrate also the children with Down syndrome, because they had to be all together sharing everything and being patient. And for example, they only have this only box of colors, and they have to wait till the Down syndrome kid is using the Jello, for example. So they develop this tolerance for frustration very easily, because they can color their sun with purple, or another color, because otherwise they need to wait. And this is like creating them elements and new tools for socializing and for understanding and being empathic and many things. So I think this would be, you would be charmed with this information.
Beautiful.
I think it's going to be very, very useful for you.
Yes, and the connection to nature. Yeah.
Anything I can help you, tell me, because I know him directly. He's like a friend of mine. He's he was part of my family somehow when I lived in Italy. So if you need to get in contact with him, if you are interested, I would be so glad to put you in contact.
Beautiful, Jimena. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Connection to nature is absolutely, that's another little topic that I wanted to bring in, but we have to call it a little short. I did want to say also that just all the pressures of the way our culture is and in the home, it all needs to be a container, that we really work on. And to me, it's suggestive of something they're calling the new monasticism. That, the new monasticism, Adam Bucko and Rory McEntee wrote a book about it, the new monasticism, that it's not about going to the monastery, that we're all called to this contemplative lifestyle, living in the present moment, which is exactly what the child does. The child, that's their nature, to be in the present moment, to be really absorbed in their work. And for this to become a value in the home and to support one another, that this is the new monastery, that we would have households that would adopt a rule, if you will, have times of silence in the home, just all these things. So I just didn't want to not say that there's a huge role to be played by the home and the family. And, you know, but we can see how it can go back. That chapter I read from is the child as teacher. And that's really where we're at, you know, and it's right at the end of The Secret of Childhood that she's advocating that the child become all of our teacher and be the model for us.
Yeah, Annie, you had another question in there about
Okay.
How does Montessori deal with computers in the classroom, and you know, after the social dilemma documentary that's out right now. So do they have computers in the classroom, and how do they address that?
Not in primary, not in my my level, and I don't believe in the next one either. Not sure, maybe for research. That time period, they're all about addressing the research mind. And, Teilhard is one of my favorite little Teilhard quotes is, to do research is to adore. So to do research on a topic is to fall in love with that topic, and to be drawn into wonderment and gratitude for it. It's that whole same complex of joy, and that's the age 6 to 12 is the research. Like I say, to research jellyfish or whatever it is that gets sparked up by the great stories. And so, I'm thinking these days, kids know you go to the computer to learn about stuff. So I'm sure there's some I don't know what the latest is, but I would think to facilitate that type of thing.
Great, thank you so much.
I'll leave you with this last little thought I just had developing all this, is that I think what we're advocating is a namaste culture. When I was introduced to namaste, it was, I honor the place in you where the entire universe resides. I honor the place where if you are in that place in you, and I am in that place in me, there is only one of us. Namaste. Namaste.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for doing it. Doing it the second week.
Namaste.
Oh.
Namaste. I'm going to share the link. Chris already did for me because I am in my phone. And I'm going to share a beautiful video that I would love you to just put it right now because you're going to love it so much.
Oh, I love it. Okay. Great. Thank you so much. You're in Mexico, is that right?
Yes, I live in Mexico City. So if
Mexico
you
City.
need anything from Mexico City, I could help you out.
Okay. Beautiful. Beautiful.
And then Olivia provided some information in the chat that you want to just add that, Olivia, about William Wadsworth?
I was just reminded by when you were talking about the child coming with this incredible metaphysical awareness and sensitivity. I love William Wordsworth's poem, Intimations of Immortality, where he talks about how the child comes from God with this incredible awareness. And, he was very sensitive as a poet, but I recommend that poem. I put it in the chat. And thank you, Jimena, for sharing about your school. That sounds fascinating.
Yes.
Wow, I didn't realize we had a visitor, a listener from India and Mexico. It's a very international call.
Oh,
Wow.
global.
And so who's coming next week, Annie?
Oh, yes. So I'm very excited. So Luke Healy. So Luke is co-founder of the Integral Christian Network. Let's see, he sent me his official bio, but I can just tell you that I'm a part of the Integral Christian Network, and the practices that Luke and Paul Smith and honestly the network have helped to develop. It's called Whole Body Awakening, and it's a meditation practice. So once again, we're talking whole child here, and it's just beautiful. It's so, it's just really helped my prayer life so much, and just my life, you know, of course. So here's his short, well, yeah, I don't know if you need the short bio, but yeah, he just says that the Integral Christian Network is an endeavor to help further the loving evolution of Christian consciousness and practice. And he is passionate about pioneering innovation in forms of spiritual community, gathering like-minded and like-hearted pilgrims on the spiritual journey, and making mystical experience of God accessible in individual and collective practice. And I'm here to tell you, he's doing that. So it's really cool, fun stuff. So
I'll take two. Awesome.
And he's a graduate of Richard Rohr's Living School.
I love Richard Rohr. Karen, do you want to wrap up?
I just want to say thank you so much to everyone, these amazing platforms, Co-Creators Convergence, the conversation, and just this, it is so beautiful to see how we can gather globally, yet really reside in this one heart of love. And one thing I've always said since I could start speaking is the children shall lead the way. So Annie, really beautiful. Thank you. And just keep, this is what's so beautiful, how we're expanding so quickly, is each Thursday night, co-creators started with one person and then said, okay, and then you invite a friend, and then that person invites a friend the next week, and so on and so on. So
yeah, it's great.
Thank you all very much.
It's our Pay It Forward program.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Chris is gonna share the video if you want to see it. It's very short. It's just 1 minute, and it's worth it to look for.
Your video, yeah.
Because Chris is the host, so he's gonna share it.
Oh, okay, great.
Wow.
Wow.
Fabulous.
She
Right, a great way to end and start. You started with Sister Jenna's remove all labels, who are we really?
There you go.
And we end with don't put labels on the kids.
Yeah.
Nice.
She made, can you put that in the chat, that link? That was, that is incredible and beautiful end. Thank you, Bob.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you all. Have fun.
Thank
Had
you.
a great time. Thank you.
May every educator be like Annie Spade. Thank you.
Aho.
Oh.
I got it.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank y'all
Night,
so much.
everyone.